All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Cheyenne Ketchum. I am the City of Southport Communications and Public Information Officer, and I wanted to welcome you and thank you for attending the Southport Symposium of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen. And before we get started, just want to go over the order of events really quickly. Once I step away, we're going to begin with board introductions, so they'll go down the table, tell a brief bio about themselves, so that way you know who you're talking to. And then they're going to proceed with presentations by each board member and the mayor. Once those presentations are done, we will open the floor for Q&A, the Q&A session. Different than regular alderman meetings, you will not need to approach the podium. I will walk around with a handheld microphone, so I will come to you. I just ask that you please do not shout, just raise your hand and I'll come to you. That way we can make sure that everybody is mic'd for your questions, so that way the folks back home can hear your questions as well. And that's all I got. So without further ado, we will go ahead and get started. So I'm going to turn it over to the board and we'll get this symposium on the road.
Okay, why don't we start with Mayor Pro Tem and work down the line.
Yay! Good morning, afternoon, everybody. So we're doing a personal bio, and I quite honestly, I prepared my remarks for later, and I didn't really write anything for this. So I am originally from Greensboro, North Carolina. You can tell by this accent that I am a native North Carolinian. I grew up in Greensboro. I spent a good bit of my adult life in Charlotte, career-wise. My degree is in communications. I was a videographer, director videographer, and freelance for the majority of my career. And then I became a realtor and I did renovations before HD TV was HD TV, in a neighborhood in Charlotte called Plaza Midwood, which is an old bungalow 30s neighborhood. And so my background, I got a lot of good experience. I probably did about 15 or 20 projects. And we bought our house here. Now I'm rambling. We bought our house here about 25 years ago this year. And the first year we had it, we stared at it. And then the next 2 years, we renovated it. So, and it was really more of a restoration. The way I look at that sort of thing is that what happens on my watch, because we're just passing through these historic homes. And so anyway, and then I moved here full time. When I moved here full time, I got a job at Bald Head for the Bald Head Association. I was the architectural review coordinator for them for 7 or 8 years, and then I retired. And I have been on the board a little over 7 years. And I think that's my story.
Alderman Lombardi.
Well, I did write it down, so I'm going to read it. My name is Tom Lombardi. My wife Marie and I have lived in Southport for almost 11 years and loving it since day one. I immediately applied and was admitted to the beautification committee. Thank you. As that Yankee from New York, but soon felt that I had become a part of Southport and welcomed by all. I realized then that volunteerism was very important. I continue serving on the committee to this day, and now liaison, but still a volunteer. Shortly after, I applied and became a member of the Board of Adjustments and served for 5 years before being elected as an alderman and now the liaison to that committee. I sat in the audience for all of the aldermen's meetings for 7 years and never thought that I would have the honor of being seated as an alderman. I knew that my life's work in the construction and road building business would somehow be helpful to Southport. That is why I agreed to run for office. I've had the pleasure of serving for 3+ years and feel that I have contributed to this board's progress and hope to continue. Thank you.
Reverend Alderman Lowe Davis.
Thank you. I am going to be brief, and I'm going to start by explaining. Most of you probably know who George Burns and Gracie Allen were, right? Okay. And perhaps you recall that after Gracie died, George started running around with Hollywood starlets, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds, and so on. And he was on The Tonight Show once, and Johnny Carson asked him about that. He said, George, you know, you're really getting long in tooth. Why are you running around with these young women? Is it, And George said, no, they have shorter life stories. I've got a long life story. I will tell you that I ran for election to this board after the board that was the board up until 2019 had done many things that I thought needed correction. They were not transparent. They were doing things that did not serve the public well or inform the public or give the opportunity for public input before making those decisions. And fortunately, John Allen, Mayor Joe Pat Hayden, and Tom Lombardi and I were elected, and we worked really hard to try to turn that around. In my other life, besides Alderman, I'm an Episcopal priest, have been for about 110 years, I think. Feels like it. And I'm also working full-time still in my 54th year as a journalist. I'm formerly an executive editor, a publisher, and I still write the editorials and lead investigative projects for the Virgin Islands Daily News. I lived in the Virgin Islands for almost 30 years. If you've been following the news about Epstein and lawsuits against him and things that he was doing, those stories started with our newspaper. I can't think of anything to add to my life story yet. Take it away.
All right, Alderman Carroll.
Robert Carroll. I have lived here since 2007. We holidayed here in the area before that. Decided to run for alderman a few years ago because all my friends were already up here. So what better way to spend more time with them? So I do have a job, so I work, not 9 to 5, but I work. And that's it. 3 kids. Very fortunate to be here.
He has a short life story as all the age grew because he's a young man. So
Yes,
there's
young.
proof.
He's young. I'm not.
So our resident journalist is correct in that regard. Alderman Allen.
Thank you. So my name is John Allen. I have a long life story, but it's not very interesting, so I'm not going to really go into it. I think I must be following Karen around, though, because I grew up in Greensboro. I lived in Charlotte, and then I moved to Southport, so I'm just following her around, apparently. I grew up in Greensboro, worked in local government most of my career in economic development and city planning. I've been in Southport on a part-time basis since 2011 and moved here permanently in 2017 to accept the job as planner for the city. And I am now retired and was elected to the board in 2019, as Lo said, with her and Tom and Joe Pat. Or I guess Joe Pat was already, yeah. And anyway, very pleased to be on the board. And it's something that, with my work in government, it's something I always thought about doing and wanted to do. And I'm very humbled and honored to be able to participate and contribute. Thank you.
Thank you. And as you know, I'm married Joe Pat Hayden. My wife, my greatest claim to fame is I married Tish Hickman Hayden. And I'm so proud of that. And her family has been here 200 years, the Hickman family, and that heritage. I ended up in Southport coming up on 38 years, July 3rd and 4th, 1985. As a doctor, Southport needed doctors, in particular ER doctors, and they needed coverage just on nights and weekends because the local doctors took care of it during the day, during the week. And so the first night that I was here was, I did not realize it as I was driving down. On the radio it said 30,000 expected to be at the July 4th festival in Southport, which my colleagues did not tell me that one fact. It was my first night here. So they had a good laugh on that as I was busy all night, and it was a wonderful experience. And I gravitated towards Southport for many reasons. First, because of the hospital, and then the wonderful people that were here, that I was honored to be their doctor. I'm a North Carolina native, grew up in Roanoke Rapids. I went to undergrad at University of Notre Dame, and then medical school, UNC Chapel Hill, where I did medicine, and then 10 years later, public health. And the majority of my career has been at Dozier Hospital, and I was asked to run for mayor in 2015, and succeeded in 2019. Lost in 2017 by 13 votes. So if you think you want to stay home on election day, don't. 13 votes. So anyway, I'm happy to serve and happy to be a public servant for the people of Southport. So thank you. And our first presenter will be Robert Carroll. Ways the public can participate in government.
Y'all are good with me being here? Okay. When I volunteered, it was kind of a joke. Didn't know I was actually going to go first. So, empowering residents, like ways to show up. When I think about ways to show up, I think this is what it's about. It's about participating. It's about engaging, influencing, shaping your community. Now, I could stop at this next slide, but I'm pretty wordy, and I find a few different ways to say the same thing. But this next slide sums it up. Not that one. That one. Show up, right? Like, this is what it's all about. So just being present, just having your words heard and your opinions do matter. We hear everybody. We've heard Ms. Kirkman every single month for the last 10 or 11 months. And we're doing stuff about it. So we could stop there, but I'm not going to do that. The importance of citizen participation, I think it's crucial. I think it's part of a healthy democracy. By engaging in our community, you can contribute. You can make positive changes, shape policies, and ensure that we, this board, remain responsive, accountable, and representative of the community's needs. Now, there are benefits to actually participating. Nothing worse than someone starting to talk about a subdivision of 1,542 homes and you have no clue what they're talking about, right? So it's nice to be informed, but it also is important to influence and help in the decision-making process. So I believe, the things that we said in that last one, participating helps residents have the opportunity to shape policies, programs, and decisions that directly impact them and their community. Representation and advocacy. By participating, residents can represent their interests and concerns, ensuring that their voices are heard by us. Transparency and accountability. Lo already spoke about transparency, and it was obvious in 2019 that was important to the residents of Southport. Residents can observe and contribute to decision-making procedures, ensuring that government actions align with the best interest of the community. We see this coming up fairly soon. I think on the 28th, we just confirmed a date for conditional zoning, which a lot of people have a lot of questions about. They want to know more. By participating in that conversation, It helps us to better understand your concerns. That show up, I should have actually said show up early and often, because it's not just the public hearing, right? It's participating through the process. The public hearing is closer to the end than it started. So the conversation started much sooner through committees, through the planning board, through conversations right here. One of the greatest benefits for our citizens is networking, getting to know your neighbors, better understanding why they moved here. We all moved here pretty much for the same reason, right? It's beautiful. Like, this is amazing. I can't imagine us not having our meetings here, because I love it. So, but this gives you an opportunity to get to know each other and better understand why we're here and what we're here to protect. Methods of participation. So, showing up today, participating in public meetings. There are more than enough public meetings for y'all to attend, I promise. Planning board, Board of Aldermen, agenda workshop, Historic Preservation Commission meets twice a month now. North Carolina July 4th Festival Committee is meeting every single week between now and the 4th. So showing up is so easy to do. The next part, volunteering to be on boards and committees. All of these, Tom started on beautification. He's still on beautification. These are important parts of what keeps Southport Southport. And by volunteering and participating, it goes back to that last benefit of getting to know your neighbors better, but it also helps make this work. The planning board, all of those people are volunteers. And interestingly enough, not that it needs to go anywhere, but one of our volunteers did become an employee, an interim employee. So they are not, they came giving themselves and they're getting something back for it. Participate in public hearings. We've got one coming up on the 28th. Show up. If it's something that concerns you, if you think that we're making decisions that are outside of what you think is best for Southport, say it. Communicate with us. We do listen, and sometimes this is a dialogue. It's between you and us. I think about the number of phone calls and emails that I've had, and I can actually count on two hands the people that have contacted me in the year and a half that I've been here. So not as many as one might expect, but maybe y'all don't have my information, and I'll share that with you in just a bit. This next one, oh gosh, run for office, they said. No, this is actually really important. What better way to participate in government than to be part of it, right? So running for office, it takes a lot. The commitment, no one can really help you to understand what the commitment is. You have to live it and experience it. But it's well worth it. If I could just do this, I would, but I have to make a living too. So engage online. Everybody likes to do that now. I know y'all are doing that, so I've seen it. Engage online. Social media. Be responsible. Be kind. These are our neighbors. Just because we're hiding behind a computer screen doesn't mean that we're still neighbors. We're still friends. We're still part of the conversation. So the cityofsouthport.com website has minutes, calendars, contact information, but engage. And then contact us. I said 5 people. I'm sure Karen's seen many more than that because she's been here longer, probably John. But engage with us. Reach out. Have a conversation. Let us know what you're thinking. I think that's an important part of participation. And that is how you contact us. So all of this information is on the cityofsouthport.com website. There's our names, telephone numbers, email addresses. You have every way you can contact us, feel free to. That's my personal cell phone. So I don't have a problem answering that call and listening to your concerns. So that's all I have, I think. Yep.
Good presentation. Any questions for Alderman Carroll? Microphone's coming to you.
People back home can hear it.
Yeah, I actually don't live here yet, but I'm exploring moving into Southport. But I have a question. Everybody else told us what they did. What do you do in your job?
Well, I'd be happy to help you move here. I'm the partner in 4 RE/MAX offices here in Brunswick County. So that is what I do. I've got 60 agents, 5 employees, and I love it. Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That's a 4-letter word here right now. So I hold back.
Hi, my name is Sherry Leone. I'm from Corning Credit Union. I'm also new to the area from New York, so it's good to see a fellow New Yorker here. I'm wondering, because my position is market development, and volunteerism is very important to me. So where would I find volunteer opportunities? And do you have to be a resident to volunteer?
Yeah. Randy, can Randy answer that question? No? Maybe? I mean, Randy, you'd be great at it. You got a good answer for all of this stuff.
Especially about volunteers.
Hi, I'm Randy Jones. I'm the Community Relations Director, and we do have multiple opportunities to volunteer. We're actually working right now to do a registry on our website for how volunteers can join. But as you've heard, we've got multiple community events that you can involve in, from beautification, forestry. But just keep your eye open. But you're not going to leave today before I get your name and number and put you to work. But we will. Just keep your eye open. We're going to actually have it on our website so we can have opportunities for all of our citizens to get involved. Thank you.
We also do advertise any vacancies, is that right, on any boards? And yep.
Any other questions? Okay, that was a very good presentation.
Can I add something real quick?
Yes,
Just
please.
for people looking for volunteer and how to volunteer, I think if you haven't subscribed to the monthly email newsletter, I'd definitely do that, because there's a lot of information in there that'll frequently talk about events coming up where we're looking for volunteers.
You can find that on the website. The city website is your friend. It may not be a friend that you know very well, but you will soon. And it, among other things, the calendar of events, the information about committees. I'll be talking about that when it's my turn, finally. And which committees, for example, you have to live in the city to be a participant in, and quite a few you don't.
Anyone else? Yes, I am trying to give everyone a chance to ask Alderman Carroll any further questions. He's a young guy. You can ask him all kinds of stuff, Let's move on. Let's move on. Yes, yeah. All right, thank you. I didn't know how to cram all this into that machine there, so I just brought it with me. And so I'm here to discuss duties of the mayor and duties of the board, and I'm not even sure how this works. You're good there. Which one here? Yeah, we're good. Perfect. So y'all can look at that, but I did my own research as well, and I appreciate them putting that up there, and I'm sure it's the same information. But one of the things I looked up, I want to start with a quote. It says, when the burdens of the presidency seem unusually heavy, I always remind myself it could be worse. I could be a mayor. And that was Lyndon Johnson. And so I have this tattooed here. So when you see me at the beach, you'll see that. And thank you. So in North Carolina, they created a very limited role for mayors compared to other states. It's a misnomer if you think the mayor runs the city. That's not true. In Chicago, yes, Mayor Daley. If you remember that great song, some of you don't, but from Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, their live concert. This is a song from Mayor Daley. State laws leave many decisions about the management and operation of municipalities to the governing board or in jurisdictions operating in a council-manager form of government. So it's the managers and the board. And these are the two main statutes. The powers and duties of the mayor are those that are conferred upon him or her by law, and those that are conferred upon him by the council pursuant to law. So it's sort of obviously open-ended, but it also is very discreet in that this is a council-manager form of government. And that's why we're so lucky to have Bonnie Theron as our city manager, because that's the key position. I don't run plant services. I can't fix a car, and it's not my job to do that. Fix a truck. I don't call Tom Stanley and ask him to do this. I don't call Chief Coring and say we need something. I call the city manager, and we talk about things. The mayor is the official head of the city for the purpose of service of civil process and for all ceremonial purposes. So half of what I do as mayor is ceremonial. And that's one of my favorite things to do is go to events. And then the other thing I do, it says the mayor shall preside over all council meetings. So I try to support our board and make sure that they are successful, that we have an efficient and successful meeting. That's my goal. And that it's welcoming and polite and gracious and that type thing. The mayor, as you know, votes only in a tie. That's it. In fact, I've never voted, which shows, right, what a good leader I am, because I get everyone together and they're very unified, and we have such a young one right here, and he's very cooperative. And if I do something wrong, I have a journalist here that will turn me in, so we're good. So except as otherwise provided by law, the government and general management of the city are vested in the council. So unless something specific in the law gives power to the mayor or someone else like the manager, the default is that the council decides. This board makes the decisions, they vote. I'm a policy person, so I help guide policy, what I think in the right direction. And we talk frequently. I talk to the manager frequently, and I listen to the citizens. You know, I heard from 5 people today, and I was happy to hear from them. And that's a wonderful dialogue. And in this day of technology, for someone to say they couldn't find you, I mean, I have patients who are on vacation find me and say, you know, they either called or texted or emailed it and had a complaint, you know, which is fine. I want to hear about it. So we can be found, so please don't hesitate. The municipal charter may contain different or additional provisions dealing with the operations of the council and mayor's role. And the general statute specifically allows the council to delegate powers to the mayor in addition to those that the legislature delegates by statute or charter, and this can occur by resolution. As you know, during COVID, this board voted to give me certain powers during the pandemic, and I used those to do what I thought was right to keep our city safe. Kept our city safe, and now we're on the backside, and look, we're just booming. And I felt strongly that it would occur that way. I mean, I don't even want to bring it up since we're so close to it, but we did not have July 4th twice, and that was my decision. And it was the right decision, and it's worked out beautifully. It really did. People stayed safe, and now we're on the back side of it, and it's going to be one of the best July 4ths ever. So I think I have covered duties of the mayor, and as well as we'll flip through these duties of the board. Mayor Pro Tem, Board of Aldermen shall designate an alderman as the Mayor Pro Tem. We could not have a better one than Alderman Mosteller. How many times a day do we talk, dear? Frequently, and it's important to do that. And she'll perform, or he shall perform all the duties of the mayor in the mayor's absence or disability in no fixed term of office. There we go. Any questions concerning the mayor or duties of the board, or any comments from the board? You know, they represent their ward, and so you can contact them at any time. That's part of their job. We are Ward 1 and Ward 2, but you can contact any board member. But they are the deciders of how we move forward.
That's great, and I'll just add, to provide a little more context around it, in North Carolina, cities and counties can only do those things that the General Assembly has given them permission to do. We're very constrained by what the state allows us to do. If the state has not somewhere within state statutes explicitly given cities permission to do something, they can't do it. And I think that's something that a lot of people maybe don't understand or don't necessarily think about when we're discussing some kind of topic, but it constrains us very much. And to be perfectly blunt, the North Carolina General Assembly in the last 12 years or so has done a lot of things that are very negative, I believe, for cities and counties in this state, and I think it's a real problem, and they're really starting to do things that are going to really have very negative effects moving forward.
If I can add to that briefly, a question that I have heard over and over again, and a question that I've asked until I knew better, was, why don't we put a moratorium on development? Why haven't we stopped all this constant building? Well, the reason is simple, and John just told you. The state says, nope, we can't do that. They will not allow us to do the kind of things that make sense sometimes to try to save and preserve the community. So we try to work within that.
All right. Alderman Lombardi.
Before I get started, my fellow New Yorker, there is plenty of opportunities on the beautification committee that you are welcome to. Right there, Lynn, she's the head of the beautification. All right, the goals and objectives of the board are to maintain excellence and transparency in government with a positive attitude, respect for others, strategic planning, and encourage public participation. Striving for security, quality of life, and controlled growth for the future. Very important. Board members must be able to maintain their integrity and independence, yet be responsive to the interests and the needs of people they represent. Board members must play different roles as advocates for the people, as legislators who balance public interest with private rights, a difficult task at times, deciding between what the law and the UDO states and what the citizens of Southport want. not always conclude, not always the same. And I think John and Lo have voiced that. And considering also in considering enacting ordinances, orders, and resolutions, and when making quasi-judicial and administrative determinations. Board members should be able to voice their opinions and suggestions freely with the respect of fellow board members and the public, even if they disagree. And vice versa, the board must respect the opinions of the public, even if they disagree, being very careful not to reach a conclusion until all sides and information has been presented. A well-qualified staff is also key for the board to come to the right decisions, which will be good for all of us in the long haul. And I think we forget a lot of times the future is what we're planning for. Finally, we must never stop planning for the future, which sometimes everyone overlooks while we are trying to solve problems of the present. Improvements of infrastructure and maintenance should never be set aside for the sake of a balanced budget, because it always costs more the following year and more taxes. I believe these are the fundamental obligations we swear to uphold as aldermen for the city of Southport. Thank you.
Any questions for Alderman Lombardi? Or any comments from the board? Okay, very good. That was very eloquent, and Alderman Lombardi has much wisdom, so I thank him for that and for his service. We all campaigned together that first time. Mr. Lombardi, Mr. Allen, and Alderman Davis and I, and we all won, and it's been a joy to work with them and serve with them, and I hope to continue, that we all continue to do so. Next up will be the budgeting process. Alderman Allen.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all y'all being here. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about the budget process and the sort of the general finances of the city and kind of how some of that works. And I don't have a presentation, so I apologize for that. I'm not as technologically as advanced as our younger colleague here. So I'm just gonna kind of have to read this. I'll try. I apologize in advance if I don't make a lot of eye contact, but I don't want to misspeak. I think creating, approving, and managing the annual budget is probably the most important function that the board does, honestly, because we couldn't do any. If we didn't have a budget and didn't have money, we wouldn't be able to do anything. The city is required, of course, to have a balanced budget every year. Our fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30. And while tracking and managing the spending and revenue is a year-round process, the work of creating next year's budget really begins around January. The board has several budget meetings early in the calendar year where we review where we are, we plan and prioritize next year's spending and plan of work and set goals for what we want to for what we hope the city will accomplish. And of course, all these meetings are open to the public. We invite public input, and I'll talk more about that as we go through. The city manager, after we have those board meetings, the city manager holds a series of meetings with the department heads to get their input as far as what they need to accomplish that program of work that the board has created. Then the manager and finance staff then prepare a proposed budget, which also includes setting a tax rate, because obviously you have to have the tax rate to know how much money you're going to have. That draft budget, of course, is available for public review and comment. The board holds several meetings, again, all open to the public, of course, that includes detailed presentations by the department heads, where they literally go through every line item of their budget and talk about what is in there and what's different from the year before, what they need, et cetera, et cetera. Then the board, of course, deliberates, talks about it, fine-tunes it, makes some changes. And then we have a formal public hearing at which citizens, again, have an opportunity to provide input, and additional changes may be made to the budget by the board as well. And after that, the board officially adopts the budget, generally in June. We have a meeting set up for June 21st this year to do that. We had our budget public hearing last week, I believe it was. Within the budget, we call it the budget, but there's several budgets in there. We have the general fund, which is kind of the city's operating budget, where we do all the usual operations, parks and rec, and that type of thing. Then we have special budgets for both water and sewer and for electric, and those are called enterprise funds. And that we keep those separate in order to provide a clear picture of the revenue and the expenses of those funds, because they are not funded through property taxes. They're obviously funded through the revenues that they create on their own within the enterprise fund. And then we also have a capital improvement fund that this board actually created and has been funding annually in order to provide money for capital projects to improve our city. It's important to note that while the police department is funded through the general fund, our fire services are regionalized and funded by a separate fire district tax that's applied to all property within the district. Because the Southport Fire Department covers well beyond the city limits of Southport. Another important part of municipal budgeting is fund balance, and that's F-U-N-D, not F-U-N, unfortunately. And that's basically the city's savings account. We currently have a very healthy fund balance in our general fund, which we're very proud of, because and we also have very hefty fund balances in our enterprise funds. We're in very healthy financial shape. In the event of a hurricane or other major disruption or catastrophe, we have to have those savings that we can use to clean out storm debris, get electrical lines back up, get water and sewer running again, repair the roads, whatever it is that needs to be done. A lot of that cost, of course, in a hurricane or a storm eventually gets reimbursed by the federal government, but we have to be able to fund that money up front while we await reimbursement. So it's very important that we have robust reserves in place to accomplish that. We'll talk a little bit about a couple of different types of taxes. Everybody knows about property taxes, I'm sure. They're technically known as ad valorem, which I think is Latin for at value. Is that right, Dr. Hayden? You're probably our Latin expert, I presume. I'm certainly not. So the amount of tax due is dependent on the value of that property. It's a combination of the value of the property and the amount of the tax rate. You do some math on it and you get your tax bill. Property taxes, ad valorem taxes, are the primary source of revenue for the general fund, accounting for nearly half of it. Of course, we set the tax rate, this board sets the tax rate every year, and the county determines the value of the property, whether it's real estate, cars, trucks, boats, trailers, RVs, all those types of things are taxed with the property tax. And then sales taxes account for about 20% of our general fund revenue. So it's an important part of it. It's not the end-all be-all, but it is a very important component of it. And I want to talk a little bit, I'm almost kind of hesitate to get into this because I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole, but sales taxes are kind of an odd duck in a way. Sales taxes are collected by the state, so the state gets all that money in. They keep a large majority of it. I think, what's the total tax rate, about 6.75, 7% maybe, and the state keeps 4.75 of that. They then send the rest of it back to each individual county. The county keeps its share, and within Brunswick County, they then distribute out what's left over to each of the municipalities. I think we have 19 of them in Brunswick County. So the county then distributes out what's left over to each of those 19 municipalities based on their population. So I know it's kind of complicated and kind of strange, but it's important to understand that what this means is that even if Southport didn't have a single retail store in our city limits, but all that, then we would still be getting sales tax revenue back, because it doesn't matter. What we get back is determined by the sum total of sales in Brunswick County. And again, even if we technically contributed none, we would still get back a portion of it based on our population. So you hear a lot about, people saying Southport's economy is based on tourism, and we absolutely appreciate and love our visitors, and they are important for us, but the real backbone of our city's economy is our citizens, because they're the ones paying property taxes. And frankly, they're contributing a lot of the sales tax revenue as well. The last thing that I'll mention is the Dosher Hospital tax. It's a special property tax of 4 cents levied on all taxable property in Smithville Township. And I know we're really getting into the esoteric stuff here, but all counties are divided into townships in North Carolina. That once 200 years ago, I think they probably had a function. They don't really have a function particularly now. There's no township level government. But Smithville Township's basically just a portion of Brunswick County that includes Southport, Bald Head, Castle Beach, Oak Island, part of St. James, and that unincorporated part of the county that's kind of in that area. That tax has been approved by the voters multiple times and can be used only for capital improvements by the hospital. And of course, this weekend, the hospital had a groundbreaking where they're getting ready to undertake some significant new capital projects, including an expansion of the emergency room. And part of that is able to be done. That is able to be done in part because of the special Dosher Hospital tax that we have. So that's not, obviously that's not everything about the budget and finances, but it's probably enough. And if anybody has any questions, I and the rest of the board would be happy to answer them.
Where do you usually meet? What building do you usually meet in? Right here?
Meetings are on the, well, let me tell you, our board meetings are here on the second Thursday of the month at 6 o'clock. We have an agenda meeting and workshop on the prior Friday at 9 a.m. at the Indian Trail Meeting Hall on Moore Street.
John, can you talk a second about the difference in the tax rate for people who are citizens of Southport versus people in ETJ? What is the difference in the rate, and what do they pay for and not pay for?
Yeah, there's no difference. They don't pay, ETJ does not pay City of Southport taxes. They just pay county taxes and the fire tax and the Dosher tax. They do not pay City of Southport taxes. If they're... Yeah, well, I mean, it's whatever, it's the city tax rate minus the property value, for $1. I mean, you can't really generalize on it, but I mean, if you had trying to remember the numbers, a $400,000 house with what, city taxes would be about $1,200 a year, does that sound right? I think that's right. So that would be the difference, from a fiscal standpoint. But I mean, that's, again, that's how North Carolina works. If you're in the municipality, you pay the tax. If you're out of it, you don't, even if your property abuts the municipal line, you don't pay. You don't get the full service of benefits, obviously, either. But yeah, ETJ does not pay city taxes.
I was going to say that very last thing, that you don't get police coverage. You get the sheriff's department, and hope that there's a sheriff's deputy somewhere near if you need them. You don't get city sewer facilities and services, and if you are in most of the our ETJ, you don't get that at all. For example, Smithville Woods is still on septic tanks.
So you see the benefit of annexation.
Yes.
Another question.
Yeah, I'm interested in how's your occupancy tax been trending, and what do what is it, 3% for North Carolina? How much does the city get?
Bonnie, I think it's a few $100,000, I believe. I've brought my budget stuff. I can look at it and see. It's about 200.
192.
Say again. 192.
We're
That's
about
pretty close to 200
at the moment for the folks back home.
And that comes from Airbnb, the hotels that we have, VRBO, those types of things. It's a significant amount of money, but our general fund budget this year is about $10 million. So, kind of give you an idea of the proportion.
And those fees that are coming in are on Airbnb, VRBO, short-term vacation rentals, are for those properties that were grandfathered prior to the new ordinance.
Do we have restaurant and any kind of tourism taxes that we are earning any money from in the city?
Only sales tax.
Just
sales taxes do
sales
apply.
tax.
Yes, do apply, but we do not. We've been trying for years to get the General Assembly to give us permission to enact a special prepared meal tax in order to, monetize our visitors, because they do create a need for services and infrastructure. But we're having an extremely hard time getting that done. There's very few cities in North Carolina that they've allowed to do that, and they all got permission to do it a long time ago.
And occupancy taxes that you just mentioned, that would only be for structures or whoever's doing that within the city limits? So
that's correct. As far as what we receive, right. Yes. We do not receive any, occupancy taxes don't work the way sales taxes do, unfortunately, because it'd be nice if we were getting a cut of occupancy taxes throughout the county. We probably wouldn't have a tax rate. But, yeah, it's just the occupancy taxes are only what's collected within the city limits.
Anyone else? Okay, excellent discussion on taxes, and know the legislature is not in a hurry to increase anyone's taxes, so I would not be anticipating taxes on food anytime soon, a restaurant tax. Alderman Lowe Davis is next, and she will talk about boards, committees, and commissions, how to volunteer and to be on one as a resident.
Thank you. Now, I'm up here because I'm used to a pulpit, and I like to be able to see the people in the pews. I have a question for you. I'm going to start with questions and answers. How many members of committees does the mayor appoint? Do you know? Somebody said all of them? How about none of them? Nah. I know that there's a misconception that the mayor does that. The mayor doesn't get to appoint anybody. The mayor assigns aldermen to be liaisons to each of the committees, and so far I don't think he's dragooned anybody into it. It's we tell him, okay, we'd like to be liaison to this or that. I'm liaison to the forestry committee. The handout that I gave you, I tried to answer as many questions as you might have, because I'm not going to read it to you. You can read it, find out what you want to know. But I do have another question. Other than Len Guyman, who is sitting right here, how many of you are on city committees? Which one are you? I thought so. Now, what's the matter with the rest of you? Come on. As Robert told you about how you can participate, some of these committees are good times. Beautification, am I right? Okay, you do a lot of interesting things. Presumably, you like to get your hands in the dirt. The Forestry Committee, believe it or not, does not saw trees. We are not the ones that dig the big holes and plant the big trees, but we do identify places that need replacement of trees. Let me also, can you hear me okay? Am I too loud? Oh, good. When I looked at the list of the boards and committees, I had not thought of this before, but I realized it evenly divided into the advisory committees that also do a lot of activities and the committees or boards that are more regulatory. And one of them is quasi-judicial, and I believe that we could technically say that historic preservation is quasi-judicial. And one of the questions you might have is, how did we come up with these committees? These 8 committees are in our in our code of ordinances, and we established 2 just in this last year. One of them, historic preservation. It came about because we aldermen recognized, oh boy, we need to have this. And this was triggered by a plan for a building, a new building that was going to demolish an existing building downtown in the historic district, and it was going to be replaced by something that didn't look like anything we'd ever seen. It certainly did not look historic. So, frankly, there was a public outcry. Why don't we protect our historic structures? And good question. So, we asked the mayor, could we have an ad hoc committee to work on creating a historic preservation committee? And he said yes. It's actually a commission. The state has some very specific rules about how a historic preservation commission is set up. So 3 of us, Alderman Mosteller, Alderman Carroll, and I, we worked with the state and we set up. What we set up was, this is what the mission, this is what the goals are, these are the responsibilities and the duties, the powers, and the limits of the powers. The Historic Preservation Commission's been meeting now for, I guess, 10 months, right? Something like that, and pretty soon we'll be coming forth with the regulations that they will ask the Board of Aldermen to approve, and then they will be the board that you go to if, like me, you live in an old 125-year-old house and you have dreams that you're going to enclose part of your front porch. And I suspect that you're going to say no, but that's where I'm going to go. And if they say no, I have an appeal process. I can go to the planning board. And if the planning board says no, I can go home and cry. The process is not that the adjunct committee, the ad hoc committee appoints the members. There were applications. We advertised for applications. We got 22. We interviewed everybody, and there are 7 members and 2 alternates. Those members are all city, because this is the city historic preservation. Some, like beautification, open to people from the ETJ and beyond. If you're interested in beautifying Southport, this is where you want to be. The other new committee was triggered by a citizen who continually brought to our attention over the course of 10 meetings of the Board of Aldermen the fact that the city was falling down on the job of taking care of our 2 city committees, cemeteries, one of which is almost as old as the city itself, which was established in 1792. And that's the cemetery committee. And just last week at the regular board meeting, the ordinance was adopted that creates this committee. Next step, the ad hoc committee will review applications, but if you're interested in doing this, look and see what it does, and then if you're interested, apply. The ad hoc committee will interview you, make recommendations, and I hope in short order get to work. The normal process for becoming a member of a committee is to, first, you fill out that application that you find on the website. Also, it gets advertised in the Port Pilot. The chairman, the vice chairman, and the alderman liaison of every committee, of the committee you're interested in, will interview all of the applicants, and then will recommend to the Board of Aldermen the people that seem to be the best fit, who have the skill set, the background, the experience, and the energy, and the interest level to serve on that committee. A number of people will put down that they're applying for 2 or 3 different committees. And so if you don't hit on one, you may get another one. I know forestry had somebody who was quite surprised to be on the forestry committee, but she had put it down and she has turned out to be a very active, good member. So that's how committees get formed. That's how you get on a committee. What are your questions? Yes.
I've heard you talk about how you get on committees and how that process works, and I've heard you mention aldermen as liaisons. What are the roles of the aldermen as liaisons to these committees?
We have no voting power. We try to carry to the committee information from decisions and goals of the Board of Aldermen. For example, to forestry, I frequently remind you got to do real complete minutes and send them to City Hall so that they can get on the website. For an awful long time, going back into the myths of ancient history, the committees didn't send in their minutes, but my role is to remind them of that, to make suggestions about things, but I can't vote on anything. And the forestry committee, for example, doesn't vote on much, other than I think we voted on where we were going to put all the trees that we were going to buy. Each year we buy about a dozen trees, and they're mostly live oaks to replace ones that we lost in a storm, or ones that we think are likely to come down. And this year, the committee voted to put all the trees that we bought down in Taylor Field, so that in a little while, a few years, we hope, there'll be shade all through the field and on the track.
And the other thing is that the liaisons give a report every month to this board and to the public on what's been going on at that committee. So that way it's a two-way conversation and information's passed.
One comment I had, Lo, yeah, it is important to apply, but I think one of the first things you might do with any of these is participate, show up, watch the meeting, and get a better understanding of what it is you are applying for. So just my thought, that might be step 0.1.
Well, so I have a question on the 4 committees that you have here. So obviously I understand beautification. In beautification we have a board which involves 8, 9 people. But then I also have a larger group where citizens can participate, not so much in the decision making, but what we are doing. And I was wondering, are there any of the other committees, if a person didn't want to be on the board or couldn't be on the board because they don't live here, is there a way that you can get volunteers to sign up? Because obviously you're extending then the pool of participants who might want to work in Parks and Rec or on the cemetery. Is there a wider group?
I do not believe that that is possible with the planning board or the board of adjustment.
No, just on the committees, not on the...
Oh, okay, not on the regulatory boards. Okay. Forestry, the only time the general public has shown up for forestry committee meetings that I can recall is when people have come with questions about what can they do about their neighbor who wants to cut down a bunch of trees or a particular tree, or to talk to us about they have a tree, they want to get it down, are we going to object? Well, we're not the ones that object. You have to get a permit to cut certain trees down, but people come and then they get interested in the whole process of preserving and enhancing the tree canopy, and they hang around, and next thing you know, they're members. As far as Parks and Recreation, I go to most of the Parks and Recreation Committee meetings, and I am not the liaison. I'm kind of the plan B, and I don't recall members of the public coming other than Lynn Gaiman and her husband, who came and suggested that Taylor Field include a bocce. Is it a court? Park? Bocce field? Yeah. Bocce court, okay. I'm absolutely certain that members of the public can come and express interest, and that the committee will, first of all, be interested in what's said, but also be interested in who you are to try to pull you in.
Yeah, I was just thinking not only for me and my interest, because like I might have an interest in doing cemetery or Parks and Rec, not necessarily being on the board because I'm on beautification board, but I'm just thinking, if one day I have nothing to do, or anybody in the city, because on each of these committees you're limiting your voice to 8 people, which is good for making the decisions, but maybe people don't want to be on a board and want, though, to take part, let's say, in cemetery. So that was my only question as to, you would expand your number of volunteers for the city.
Lynn, did you mention, you said volunteer, but just so everybody knows, the first Saturday of every month is cleanup, and it's through the beautification committee.
Yeah,
and we meet.
We have, for example, I have 170 people that I reach out to. Not everybody comes, obviously, but we get about 25 people every month because they want to come and they want to help. Now, some of those people, or myself, might want to help with cemeteries, not through beautification, but as another alternative. I would love to get involved in Parks and Rec, and I have gone to some of the meetings, but there's no hands-on except for what we do through beautification. So again, I'm not thinking just of myself, I'm thinking of how we can get more volunteers from the city to maybe do what the committees decide on, you know, proceed further.
Let's talk about that at Parks and Rec especially. I can tell you also that forestry, again, I'm liaison to that committee, and so I know that one best. The forestry committee does a lot of public information, and we do pruning workshops a couple of times a year, and we get a good turnout, and people listen and then fan out and start, you know, pruning some of the bushes and trees, especially the saplings, the ones that we have planted maybe the year before or the year before that need to get, you know, encouraged to shape a certain way. So through public action like that, people become interested.
Not everybody wants to be on a board or has the time to devote to a board. So it's something like that, you know, maybe for cemeteries or Parks and Rec.
Anybody else? Okay. How many of you are going to volunteer for a committee now? A question. We have a question, not a volunteer, unfortunately.
It's not. I'm sorry. It's not really a question, or it's just a comment. I started out doing a lot of volunteerism. My problem is I keep getting hired, so I can't volunteer anyplace else. Okay. Dr. Mayer would know. I lost track someplace around 2,000 hours at the hospital as a volunteer. We spent many weekends together. So I think the point made about trying to get general people that want to be boots on the ground, maybe not special interest as pruning or something like that, but I think there's boots on the ground and activity level that can be tapped into for the cemeteries and things when they are able or capable and not having a bad day or a conflict or family visiting, that we need to somehow organize and present and bring forward every time.
Good point. And I am confident that the new cemetery committee will be calling for a lot of volunteers. I used to volunteer with the beautification committee, and then my niece said, "Are you insane?" So I don't do that anymore, but I wish you well all the time. Any other questions? Thank you. Oh, I was going to put down on the sheet who the members of every committee are, but that would have made it way too long. 2 pages, that's enough.
All right, thank you. That was an excellent presentation. Next up, it says brief, and so I guess that's a hint, because when you think about community history, I mean, this started in 1792. So I will be brief, and what I'm going to do is just use the books that I have with me, and
You're not going to read them all, are you?
no, someone would probably have to read them to you, but but no, no. So the first book that I read about Southport was Joshua's Dreams, and just a show of hands, how many have read this book? Yeah, most of you have read this book. A majority of you have. So, as you can see, I've read it because those are my markings, right? No. And so, well, I am going to read just a very short part of this. And Susie Carson is someone that I knew, and I was grateful to have known her. And she was a delightful woman and a great historian. And it starts with A Town is Born, 1792 to 1860. Joshua Potts, who was very much interested in starting a town around Fort Johnston. At the time of the American Revolution, Joshua Potts was living at his home in Halifax County. So that's where I'm from, Halifax. So that's north of here. After the Revolution, he moved to Wilmington, where he became a merchant, lawyer, surveyor, and broker. In 1786, he became ill with a debilitating fever. Could have been anything, viral, malaria, who knows back then what he could have picked up. Captain John Brown was master of a packet that plied between Wilmington and Charleston, making regular stopovers at Fort Johnston. He felt that the sea air would be beneficial to Potts. Joshua agreed. The men camped out for a day or so and enjoyed the company of the men at Fort Johnston and the area river pilots. He credits the salubrious breezes. I've heard that so many times. He felt strongly that the area would be a delightful place for a town. So he credited the salubrious breezes for his recovery. So this is a must book to read about Southport. And then what she did, she had different people write about some of the founding fathers of Southport. She wrote about Joshua Potts. And so different people wrote about, someone wrote about Dr. Dozier, someone wrote about Charlie Goss. In fact, Ms. Kirkman wrote about Charles Goss. And she asked me to write about Dr. Dozier, but I didn't even know where she lived, and I was so busy I kind of forgot about it. Someone else wrote about it, but I've written much about him since that time. But anyway, so this book, easy to read, and you don't have to read it all at once. Same with Joshua's Dream. So if you want to know anything about Southport, these are the books. The other books that I went to learn about Southport is Mr. Bill Reeves went through the newspapers and categorized dates, topics. So if you want to look up a name, let's say Sarah Woodside, page 35, you can go here and you can read about that individual. I use this book to do my research on Dr. Dozier, so you could go in here. He was, this is from 1520 to 1887, so he was born in 1878. And then the one that would be more current for us would be from 1920 to 1940. So a lot of information in here, and it's really interesting what they talked about in the newspaper and that type thing. So he did extensive research, but I would definitely go to these books. In terms of architecture, Southport, this book is a must. Fantastic book. I'm sure as an architecture person, Mayor Pro Tem has read this many times. You've got the River Pilots Tower on West Bay Street, early 1940s, the pictures in here. The Carolina House, which is no longer there. The Stevens Taylor House, which is still there. Fort Johnston, officers' quarters. So this is a marvelous resource book. Before we were quaint, I don't know how many of you knew Mr. Mizell, but he was a journalist, fellow journalist, and he put this book together before we were quaint, and he used to write a column, and I cut it out of the newspaper, and it was from 2008, and I'm just going to read just a very short paragraph of it. In our own backyard, he lived on, I believe, West. In my own backyard, my wife and I discovered early on that in one section, you can't put a shovel into the ground without coming up with oyster shells, burnt wood, and an occasional broken oyster knife blade. Conversations with the daughter and grandson of Eva Wolf, the lady who lived here for 69 years, confirmed that the back of our lot was the site of more oyster rows than you could count. We have the good fortune of living in a block where life is like the 1940s and 50s, with conversations among the neighbors over backyard fences, and where when anyone has a mess of fish or oysters or shrimp, everyone brings a dish or two or something, and everyone's invited. I thought that was so sweet, so wonderful. And that still exists. I think I mentioned that, the unique neighborhoods that we have all over the city. So, Mr. Mizell, before we were quaint, you've all seen Robert Potter's artwork, marvelous, marvelous artist, and he chronicles his family, and the Potter family been here for decades and decades and centuries, so this is a wonderful book to read. Southport Secrets, a quilt, and this is a delightful book. Again, it's easy to read. Has the nuclear power plant in it. It has Franklin Square Gallery, Southport City Seal, and all the different, someone has written about each different block. And so this is a really just a fun book to read. Of course, Tommy Harrelson's book, you have to have this book, Art Newton. Art Newton captured Southport in so many ways. And we celebrated his centennial of his birth, and the artwork in here is just phenomenal, and the photography. I mean, just look at the colors, look at genius, young genius. So beautiful, beautiful work, and so I definitely recommend this one. I love looking at it, I really do. In fact, Tish and I have this one. She found this one, and we have this ship. So we're lucky to have one. Ooh. Yes. So, and then the classic is The Way It Was, and very nice, beautiful photography. This is one of my favorite pictures, and it's the waterfront. We don't look like this now anymore, but that's okay. But the beauty of Southport is still here. And so they've got these wonderful pictures, and go out and get a copy, buy one at Christmas and send it to a family member, friend, pictures of Hazel, just phenomenal photography. And so we should have one of the hospital in here, and have old bald head.
Old Baldy.
Yeah, they know the lighthouse right after that. Yes, old Baldy's in there also. And so, this is a book that if you really want to know about Southport, and makes easy reading too. It's just captions, so easy for any of us to read. This book was given to me, even Alderman Carroll. I'm going to get him a copy if he doesn't have one. Stop. Y'all just got to stop. Stop it. Stop it. All right. Masters of the Shoals. This is one of the best books I've ever read. How many have read this one?
I have.
Yes, a good number of you. Not as many as the other, but this is Trudy's brother, and he just captures the courage and the experience of what these river pilots needed to survive during a very difficult time in our country's history. Tommy Harrelson is related to Thomas Brinkman, and as you know, Thomas Brinkman was the pilot on the Condor who was carrying Rose Greenhow when she drowned right off of Fort Fisher. And of course, you all have copies of The Old Man and the Boy. Absolutely, you gotta have more than one. Actually, we have too many of those copies. In fact, Tish's father was at Chapel Hill when it came out in 1957, and we have that copy. And it's a beautiful book, and just an incredible writer. And I'm just going to read the first sentence. And he had me at the first sentence. The old man knows pretty near close to everything. Now, if you can't keep reading after that one sentence, if that doesn't pique your curiosity, in the second sentence, and mostly he ain't painful with it. I didn't know anything about Southport. I didn't know where it was. I'd never heard of Ruark. But when I read that first sentence, I said, man, what a great writer, because he captured you right away. I'm going to end with, the hospital and J. Arthur Dozier. This is a program that I did 25 years ago on April 30th. It was the anniversary of his 120th anniversary of his birth in 1998, so 25 years ago. And I was trying to find his grave site, and I went to the old Smithfield burying grounds, and I went through there over. Don't shake your head, Ms. Kirkman, because I didn't live here at the time, but I know what you're saying. I went there over and over again and could not find him. So I went to the library, and I went to Mrs. Wilson, and I said, I cannot find this grave site. And she said, here's a book that gives you the list of the cemeteries, as Ms. Kirkman will tell you. And I went, oh my goodness, Northwood Cemetery, just down the road from the hospital on Fodale Avenue. So I go out there and I'm looking around, and I was having trouble finding it, and a gentleman was there, Mr. Frink, and he was there cleaning some gravesides and taking care of some of the stones there. And he asked me what I was doing. He said, you have people here? I said, no, I'm looking for Dr. Dozier. And he says, J. Arthur? I said, yes. He says, right behind you. So I was looking in the wrong direction. So it's wonderful. And here's the, you got to keep the dust jacket. That's, you have to keep that. That's the most important part of the book, they say. And, Ms. Carson used to do a column every month. And let's not forget the history of the movie industry here. I have something, I have dozens of notebooks, unfortunately. Poor Tish, she has to see them. But this is an article from the Raleigh paper. And it says, Southport's not the same. Folks won't soon forget the summer they made Crimes of the Heart. So many of y'all were here, I was not. I was working here at the time and met Sissy Spacek. She came to the hospital to say hello to everyone, and I was embarrassed. I didn't know who she was. I never heard of her before. So, and I mean nothing wrong about that. I've been in medical school and studying. I really wasn't keeping up with Hollywood at that time. So she was a young and incoming actress. So, you have multiple ways to learn about the history of Southport. Get these books, read them. Randy's great-grandfathers, J. Arthur Dozier, Tish's family, the Hickmans, have been here hundreds of years. And so there's still descendants that live in Southport, and we're still grateful for that heritage. And Southport Historical Society, nobody's mentioned it, right? If you haven't joined, right, Ms. Kirkman? Yes, sign up. And so that is 231 years rather quickly. So thank you. Any questions? Okay, great. And our next speaker will be Mayor Pro Tem Mosteller on ordinances.
The best for last. Okay, buckle up because this is a little bit long and dry. So generally we have two types of ordinances, City Code and the Unified Development Ordinance. Southport City Code of Ordinances are considered our police power ordinances. The word police derives from the Latin poleta, a term the ancient Romans used to refer to the civil administration of government. The City Code of Ordinances includes things like park regulations, the noise ordinance, regulations to do with streets and sidewalks, and health and sanitation. The City of Southport Unified Development Ordinance, also known as the UDO, contains zoning, subdivision, tree ordinance, signage, and other land development regulations. The city's city code ordinances apply only within the corporate limits of our city, and the UDO applies zoning and other development ordinances within the city limits and our extraterritorial jurisdiction, known as the ETJ. The ETJ is approximately a 1 mile zone around the outside of our city limits. Let's start with the Southport City Code of Ordinances. It may be helpful to know that under Health and Sanitation, Section 912, spitting is prohibited. No person shall spit on the sidewalks or on the floors of any public buildings. While many of the regulations in the current code of ordinances have not been updated since 1978. Others have. In March of 2019, the city adopted our current animal welfare ordinance. We can be proud of the animal welfare ordinance. It's not an animal control ordinance. It's an animal welfare ordinance. And that, among other things, it addresses the need to have shelter standards and requirements for dogs that are left outside in extreme temperatures. This ordinance includes trap, spay, neuter, release best practices for community cats and establishes the duties and powers of our Animal Protective Services officer. Not only do we have the best animal welfare ordinance in the state, because as a small town, we have the ability to be the best. But so I think this is a perfect example of taking advantage of that. And so it also establishes the duties and powers of our Animal Protective Services officer. Our community is very fortunate to have Kate Marshall serve as our APS officer. More recently, last year, the city amended the Code of Ordinances to establish the Historic Preservation Commission, which Lo has already mentioned, and the Exterior Lighting Ordinance. That's one of my handouts. I did 2 handouts, so I thought you might find it interesting to see the lighting ordinance, the Exterior Lighting Ordinance. And then just last month, the Board of Aldermen amended the code as it relates to the city's official appointed boards and committees and commissions regarding term limits, the interview and appointment process, and associated timelines, which Lo mentioned all of those committees. Unlike changes in the Unified Development Ordinance, changes to the city code of ordinances are considered and adopted by the Board of Aldermen without input from the Planning Board. On to the UDO. The Unified Development Ordinance is the implementation tool for our comprehensive plan. Currently, the Southport CAMA Core Land Use Plan serves as our comprehensive plan and is the foundation for our zoning ordinances. A quality comprehensive plan seeks to answer questions of prosperity and opportunity, character and preservation, resilience and revitalization. State law calls for a plan that sets forth goals, policies, and programs intended to guide the present and future physical, social, and economic development of the jurisdiction, and uses text and maps to designate the future use or reuse of land. In the past, state statute required that 20 counties, 20 coastal counties, and the municipalities within maintain a CAMA Core land use plan. Southport's current plan was adopted in 2014 with some minor revisions in 2020. Starting July 1 of 2022, new North Carolina state statute required that all local governments have a comprehensive plan in order to retain authority to adopt and enforce zoning regulations. So that's a new law, new state statute. The UDO contains the zoning regulations that are used to implement the community goals and values found in the comprehensive plan. The zoning districts are listed on the front page of the handout. This is the handout. All land within the city's planning jurisdiction is classified by this ordinance to be within one of several base zoning districts or overlay committees. The table of permitted uses, which I think is an interesting thing to look at, it includes the regulations for each zoning district and are enforced and interpreted according to the following rules. If you look at the top of the document along here, you can see it tells you what I'm getting ready to talk about. And these are all the different zoning districts. I'm going to find myself. Okay, so these are the rules. Uses by right. These permitted uses are permitted by right, which means, as an example, if you go to page 3.9 in the handout, wherever 3.9 is. Anyway, if you go to 3.9 and look at where it says alcoholic beverages packaged and retail, that is a permitted use by right in Central Business District, and Highway Commercial. And that means that you're allowed to have that kind of business in those zones. Special uses. Special uses are permitted subject to compliance with oftentimes additional regulations specified and require a permit to be issued by the Board of Adjustment. Like a bed and breakfast would require a special use permit in a residential neighborhood. So permitted or special use with standards. If you go to page 10 and look at the bottom where it says farmers market, you can see that the farmers market in an R10, if you go up and you look and it says R10 at the top, that requires a special permit, a special use permit, and with standards. So, but then if you go to up at the top where it says CBD, which stands for Central Business District, go to Business District next to that, and then if you go all the way down, that shows that it's a permitted use in a business district with standards. And then the standards you can find the standards further into the document. So that's kind of how to make a watch. So unlisted uses, part of that is at the discretion of the UDO administrator to sort that out. And then you can appeal to the Board of Adjustment if you have any concerns about that. Permits are required for a variety of reasons. The permitting requirements are found in the UDO. Zoning permit shall be required for changes of use or of any of the following: all new principal and accessory structures, enlargements of existing structures, construction, installation of fences, walls, piers, docks, decks, stairs, signs, and driveways, and or any activity that proposes to increase the amount of impervious square footage on a lot. That's what it says. That's interesting. Building permit, I think we're all familiar with building permits and when they're required and that sort of thing. Anytime you're going to do construction or alter a building or build a building or a structure of any kind. Tree impact permit. Tree impact permits shall be issued for any proposed removal or alteration of a regulated tree as defined by this ordinance. And tree permits are free. We encourage people to be part of that process. Floodplain development permit, sign permit. If you're going to put up a sign, a business sign is going to put up a sign, they must first get a sign permit. Stormwater permits, CAMA permits. It's my understanding, Travis, you can correct me if I'm wrong, typically minor permits are awarded by the city, and then major permits are actually awarded through CAMA, which is their closest office is Wilmington, that we do. The following bodies and city staff have powers and responsibility in administering this ordinance: reviewing applications for development and subdivision proposals, hearing matters of quasi-judicial nature or amendments under this ordinance. the Board of Aldermen, the Planning Board, the Board of Adjustment, and our UDO administrator, which is our Director of Planning. The ordinance lists the Board of Aldermen first, but the real work begins with staff and the Planning Board. The Planning Board powers and duties, and I'm just giving a short list of them. There's more, but they prepare and recommend to the Board of Aldermen ordinances promoting orderly development along the lines indicated in the comprehensive plan. Review and recommend to the Board of Aldermen proposals for any zoning map or text amendments. They review and recommend to the Board of Aldermen applications for major subdivision, preliminary, and final plats as specified in this ordinance. So they also hear and decide applications for major site plans. The UDO states, and what that means is that's an administrative approval that they do. The UDO states that the Planning Board shall review the major site plan and the written recommendations from the UDO administrator and the technical review committee, made up usually of sometimes it might have the building inspector, but it definitely has fire representation from the fire department and our police department and public works, and the Planning Board, if the site plan submitted otherwise meets all of the standards in the UDO, the Planning Board shall approve. Anytime you see the word shall, means must. So they review to make sure all the pieces are there, everything that's required and is consistent with what's in the ordinance. And then if it is denied, they communicate that in writing, and a revised plan can then be submitted. And additionally, the Planning Board will be involved in revising the comprehensive plan. The Board of Aldermen, power and duties of the Board of Aldermen with regard to the UDO, to hear and decide applications for zoning map and text amendments, and to hear and decide proposals for major subdivisions, preliminary and final plats. The Board of Adjustment, power and duties. The Board of Adjustment is the appeals board, is kind of a good way to think about it, among other things. The Board of Adjustment decides whether variances from the requirements of the UDO should be granted. Nothing in this ordinance shall be construed to authorize the Board of Adjustment or other bodies to permit a use in a district where that use is neither a permitted use nor a special use. So, and then they are also responsible for special use permits. You saw in the table of permitted uses where special use permits are required. That's submitted for review before it's granted. And oftentimes they may add conditions to that approval. We refer to the UDO as a living, breathing document because it is ever evolving. The last major update that basically overhauled the entire document except for the stormwater chapter took 2 years, and we knew it still needed work. There have been several changes to the UDO since the last update, and we will continue to review and update it. That's just the nature of that document. At the present time, lots in the historic area that are less than 10,000 square feet are considered non-conforming because in the current version of our UDO, we only have R10 standards for in-town single-family residential zoned area. And we need to consider an in-town residential zoning district that no longer identifies our historic area as non-conforming and includes standards and setbacks consistent with the unique design of this part of our community. I'm going to give an example. Alderman Carroll's house over on East Nash, is one of a handful of lots in the historic area that actually conform to the R10 standards. It's very rare. And according to the UDO, if something happens to his house, he would have to rebuild with a 25-foot front setback, totally inconsistent with that area. So there is much to consider as we recognize ways to improve the UDO. Sometimes I think the word unique is overused. However, our zoning ordinance have to reflect the unique circumstances that exist in Southport. Residential and businesses side by side, the need for historic preservation. Here at the water's edge, we have environmental concerns that are unique to our specific location, and the list goes on. We recognize that good planning will shape the future of our city. I believe this board is committed to providing the tools that our planning staff needs to facilitate the best outcomes. We are continuing to prioritize city planning by supporting increased staff. The proposed budget, John was giving us a budget lesson. The proposed budget for the upcoming year includes funds for a new planner position to focus on the work of the Historic Preservation Commission, the Historic District Guideline implementation, and our downtown areas. A robust, comprehensive plan is the foundation for good planning, and the new budget also includes funding for the creation of a new comprehensive plan. Finally, as we continue to grow, I for one am grateful for the leadership and commitment of our planning director and staff and our planning board. Our town is better for their work.
That was excellent. And you're right. It's not easy to put all that together in a concise form, and you really did a wonderful job between the UDO, the Code of Ordinances, shall meaning must, the different for R10, a business district, central business district, open space. I mean, these are all very important and very technical, and without it, I can tell you, without the UDO and its protection, we would not have been able to keep these boat lifts out of the yacht basin. We had a wonderful attorney who helped us with that, and that would have just helped to destroy that ecosystem there. So the UDO was very important. It specifically said that that area was open space and it could not be used. And so we're grateful for that. It's growth and development is here. It's with us. You can. Mr. Henley doesn't even sleep at night now. I'm having to prescribe things for him just so he can sleep. I'm just kidding. I don't prescribe anything, but for sleep anyway. But it's a lot. I mean, it's growth and development is here in our UDO and our planners, and to have a second planner, and how fortunate that we have a planner as on our board, Alderman Allen. I mean, that's just so crucial. And the fact that we're getting a planner for the Historic District, Historic Commission, is so important. How y'all brought that forward. Alderman Carroll bringing that committee forward is so important. So any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Do they ever post when people apply for a building permit? And also, do they ever post when it's been approved?
I don't know. I don't know that we have a public posting. I will tell you this: when you apply for a building permit, they communicate with you through email and let you know when you can schedule inspections that way and do all of that, and they let you know when you're approved and that sort of thing.
Okay, but it's not public information. Say, for example, if there's an empty lot next to me, it's been empty for a long time. If a builder decides to come in and put a house on it, and they have to go to approval or maybe a variance, a zoning variance, do they ever have that? It's public knowledge that it's up? And then also, is there a time that it's also shown that it's approved? I have to say, I've seen in the past where newspapers small town newspapers have put a list of things that have been applied for, building permits that have been applied for, and then also after they've been approved, the building permits have been approved. And if something's up for a zoning, a variance, they also put that out there so that if there's, you know, people have some interest in it, they can see it.
If there is a variance and it's applied into the Board of Adjustments, neighbors are notified before.
But not townwide, but it's not a townwide
No.
information, yeah.
I've asked, and I believe that the good folks who work on our website every day are working on this. I'd like to see exactly as you described, and I will tell you that this is a moneymaker for newspapers because people like to read what are the permits being applied for. Our newspaper used to also put how much the amount of the application was for, you know, because it's a percentage of the cost of the renovation or the building construction. But I'd love to see permits in the paper, on the website. It's up to the paper whether you want to do that, but on the website, permits applied for, permits approved, and that would include tree permits. The Forestry Committee frequently gets, members of the committee frequently get questions about, did they have a permit to cut that tree? Well, it would be nice if you could just look on the website and find out.
We'll defer to our planning director.
Yeah, hi. So if you go to the Development Services Department website and go under Permits and Inspections, one of the tabs you can click on is Active Permits. And it is a rather dense Excel spreadsheet worth of permits, but everything is there. And certainly, if there's any specific questions about any permit you see, it is under. It is right here under Permits and Inspections, and then Active Permits is right there. Absolutely.
Does that give, I haven't seen that, so thank you. Does that give addresses? Okay.
Well, I'd like to first thank everyone for their dedication and contributions and trying to just manage the explosions and the unimaginable growth and variety of things happening to this town. But my question is going to deviate a little bit. We have ordinances and overlays and just a wealth of information and what's allowed and what's not allowed, but what is the city's direction on, and I read every day about noise ordinances and right-of-ways, and how are we as a city going to go forward to enforce our rules and regulations and things?
I am glad you asked that question. We're very excited.
Well, we're very excited. A lot of the conversation around right-of-ways and different things is not totally to fruition, but the city right now is using a contract service that are doing a really great job by all accounts, so we're very excited about that. And you're advertising now for a staff person as well, so we're very excited. I think we're on that path. No.
No, they.
You go ahead. You can go
yeah,
ahead.
I tell you, I really like these guys. They are actually enforcing the ordinance. So they are sending people letters. They are following up on this. And in last week's meeting, we got an update that showed that the majority of what's out there is actually being, people are complying. I like these guys because they're participating in the community, they're showing up at restaurants, they're making business owners aware of the A-frame sign ordinance. And when they approach you, it's a much friendlier conversation about, you know, your grass being overgrown or your whatever, you know, the issue might be. So they're doing a great job. I think the city manager's happy with them. I know we're happy with them, and I hope that there's something. I hope they become a more permanent fixture in our community.
And they're being proactive. I think part of your question is proactive versus reactive, and they're being proactive in the administration.
So it's no longer a complaint-based situation. He's actually going around, he's talking to people, he's introducing himself, and it's a very cooperative, collaborative, that type thing. It's not adversarial at all. His name is Chris, his partner's name Chris, so all you do is say Chris and you're in good shape. Say yes, Chris, thank you, Chris. It goes well for you. Thank you, Chris. And you can't go wrong. So
if you saw them at the meeting Thursday night, I don't know, I believe you were there. Oh, that's right.
But that's over, right?
Yeah.
That's over.
Well, the two Chris's, I was thinking as they got up to talk to us Thursday night, if those two guys showed up at my door and said, "You've got a violation, ma'am," I would be quick to deal with it. They know what they're doing and they mean business. And they also have the knowledge and the skill set to deal with some of our city's most perplexing problems, which are tumble down, deteriorated houses that seem to be vacant or, heaven forbid, somebody's living in them. But it's been one of those situations. It's very hard to nail down who's the owner, who's responsible, how do we deal with this and still respect the owners. They know what to do, and they're not messing around.
I have a question for all of you, anybody who wants to respond or everyone. We all know, or most of us know, that everything you say and do when you're sitting in one of these meetings is recorded and live streamed. How does that affect you as an alderman, as the mayor, in your being comfortable with knowing and that it's all out there and that social media, Facebook, is recording and people are looking and hearing all that you say? Does that at any time make you feel uncomfortable at all? Are you okay with that social media type thing? I know this is a hot button in the city right now, and that our city attorney is working on the city's social media policy. So does any of this enter into that?
I'll start with that. Just I am who I am, and that's all that I am, and whether they're recording or not, it doesn't, I don't even think about whether it's being recorded. I say what's appropriate, and I'm usually kind and trustworthy and gentle and appreciative and gracious, and try to do all that at every meeting and welcoming. And so it never crosses my mind about, gee, what am I going to say or not say with respect to I'm being videoed. It just doesn't enter into my behavior in that regard.
And I feel the same way. I say what I have to say because I swore to do everything I can for the city of Southport. Whether it's popular or not, I don't worry about getting reelected. I do what I have to do and what's the right thing to do. So no, I'm not intimidated.
I don't even think about it anymore. I think some of my sermons and services are available on 8-track. I'm used to this.
Well, my final question is this. Oh, okay, excuse me, fellas.
I think that what they've said, I agree with completely. I think that one of the great things about this board, even that was here before me, is that they worked hard to prove that they are who they say they are. They do appreciate public comment. So this idea of transparency, the technology has already improved in just a few years. So I think that this board is a board that supports that. We now have a policy as it relates to remote participation. This is surprisingly forward thinking.
For a bunch of old people. I said that. I'm old. That's okay. I can say. Yeah, I'm really unaware of being on camera and, having all my comments transcribed and whatever. I mean, I don't even really think about it. There's two things I want to say about that. As far as what we say, I think people get frustrated with us because we don't, sit up here and rail against developers and immediately dismiss any new development that is proposed, or whatever. But I mean, we can't do that. The developers, property owners have rights too, and we have to be a fair and impartial body. If somebody submits some kind of big development, like at Indigo, we all have our own individual thoughts about it, personal thoughts about it, as do all citizens, because we are also citizens. But we can't just sit up here when they first propose it and just say, no, we're not going to do that, can't do that. I mean, we have to let the process play out, and we have to have some impartiality, and we have to consider the facts and follow the law. And I think people get frustrated with us a little bit. So just so y'all know, I mean, we have to do that. I mean, that's the process. We all took an oath to uphold the laws of the state of North Carolina, the Constitution of the United States, and we have to do that. The other thing, as far as the social media policy, I want to be real clear, it absolutely has nothing to do with squelching discussion or anything like that. It's purely about making sure that we as aldermen don't do something that creates a First Amendment problem for the city in some way. And because it's real easy to do that. And it could really frankly drag the city into a very expensive, messy lawsuit if we're not careful. And we don't need to be doing that. And that's really what it's about. It's about just making sure we don't get in trouble.
Thank you. Now, my next question is, I know that 3 of you and the mayors, your terms run out at the end of this year, so we have elections coming up in November. Would you be willing to tell us if you're running again today, and so the state pilot can report it?
I don't think you can discuss campaign stuff. I don't know.
So, but we can wait till July 7 to 21 when you have to report to the county, to let us know if your hat's in the ring or not. But I just thought maybe you'd want to raise your hand and throw them in today. But if you don't, it's okay. We'll wait.
All right, thank you. And again, to reiterate about social media policy, it's really aldermen can say what they want to say. That's not the issue. It's just that there's certain things that have to be done. They have to first say that they're not speaking as an alderman, but as a private citizen. There has to be a disclaimer, and that they have to keep a record of it. I mean, that was the biggest thing. And so there is no censorship involved at all with that policy. Anyone else?
I just have a closing comment on the whole taping and everything. First off, I think the transparency is excellent. I appreciate when I can't be in person to have the information available to me for, I don't know, months, because I have watched and I have learned. And I think it's an excellent tool. We all are humans and we all get nervous in front of people or whatever, and cameras just bring a different aspect of it. But from what I've experienced since I've started following things, everyone is, it doesn't matter whether the camera's there or not, and I think it's an excellent tool. And kudos for continuing it and for the individuals that have put it up and maintain it and the communications in this town. I, for one, as a resident, appreciate it.
Anyone else? Okay. Yes. Yes, we are. Closing comments. Alderman Allen? Anything? Any closing comments?
I don't have anything. Just thank y'all very much for coming, and please let us know if you have questions or want anything or think we need to be doing something or whatever.
Alderman Carroll?
Yeah, feel free to reach out to us. All of our contact information is on the Southport.com website. Happy to have a discussion about pretty much anything that we've got going on right now. Just a note, I think most of these books, or many of these books, can be purchased at the Visitor Center. A few of these books can be purchased at the Visitor. Okay, perfect, all of them. So just something to run right over there and invest in.
Alderman Davis.
As a member of the Friends of the Library, I would also mention that they're also available at the library. A reminder that every night at 7:30, there is a ceremonial lowering of the flag, and this week, Sisters of Southport are the ones doing it. It's a very moving ceremony, and it's a wonderful tribute to our nation, our military, and our veterans.
Okay. Alderman Lombardi.
Yes, I want to thank everybody for coming, and it's been our pleasure to answer any of your questions.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank y'all for coming.
Yes, thank you for being here. I want to thank our city staff for setting all this up. Cheyenne, thank you. City Manager Bonnie Theron, thank you. Randy, thank you. Sydney, thank you for this. And Travis Henley, thank you for sitting through this. Appreciate you being here for any expertise questions. And we have the pilot here today. Bob, thank you for being here. And the symposium has been fantastic. Each department has come through, and we look forward to the other departments. Of course, this is one of the strongest ones here, of course, so we were happy to participate. So I'll turn it back over to Cheyenne.
Thank you all again for coming. We look forward to seeing you in July. The next one is July 17th, right here in the community building again at 2 p.m. That will be the Finance and Utilities Department. In the meantime, scan this nifty little QR code here to give us an anonymous feedback on your symposium experience today. That way we can continue to better the symposiums for the future. This is, as you know, our first year of doing these, so we just want to make sure that we're improving each time. And if you need assistance with the QR code, just let me know, or you can just visit the city website under the Community Relations webpage. And then you can also register for the July Symposium on that same webpage, or scan the second QR code. But with all of that being said, y'all have a great evening. Be safe. There are some storms forecasted for this afternoon into the evening. So be safe and have a good one. Thank you.
You mean we're going to do this again?